Wednesday morning, and a pleasure to welcome to our studio former Broome County Executive Jeff Kraham and current member of the Binghamton Town Board. Good to have you in our studio.
Good morning, Bob. It's great to be here.
How many years has it been since we've actually talked face-to-face? It seems like a really long time.
Well, it's probably sometime in 2004. That's when I left the county executive's position, so most likely about that time frame.
I was going to say over a decade.
Yeah.
Well, anyway.
It was 18 and a half years ago that I was elected county executive, so that it doesn't seem possible.
How did you become involved in the world of politics? How did that all start?
Well, I was actually a county legislator for 14 years. I was first elected to the county legislature in 1976. And then 4 years later, actually became chairman of the county legislature in 1981. And at that time, and I think the record still holds, I was the youngest legislative chairman in New York State. And I don't think, because that's usually a job that goes to somebody, a real seasoned veteran of the county legislatures or board of supervisors or whatever. So, so I was in there for 14 years, and then I left in 1990. And at that point in time, our businesses that my wife and I operated was expanding. Our family was expanding. And I thought it was, at that point in time, I'd spent a third of my life in county government, really. So I thought it was time to step back. So kind of took a break for 6 years. But in 1996, it became very apparent as the economy was sinking in Broome County. And really the straw that broke the camel's back is when Hughes purchased Link Aviation, was going to move a number of people to Texas. They were going to close the facility here in Kirkwood. And having grown up in Hillcrest where there was a Link plant, a lot of my friends' parents worked there. And then when I sort of found out that the former county executive, my predecessor, really hadn't done anything to try to convince Hughes to remain in Broome County. And it was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back, and I decided that I needed to run and get someone with a business perspective in as county executive.
Who was the county executive when you first were elected to the legislature? Was that Donald McManus?
Donald McManus came in the same year I did.
And then he was followed, I believe, by Carl Young?
Carl Young, yes.
And then, was it Tim Griffin?
Yes.
Okay.
When Carl Young became county executive is when I became chairman of the legislature that same year, 1981.
Before you ever ran for the legislature, before you got involved at all in county government, did you envision a day where you would wind up becoming the county executive?
No. When I was a legislator, I was always interested in government. Back in 6th grade, actually, every day after school, I took the bus to downtown.
What school?
Hillcrest Elementary. I took the bus downtown Binghamton every single day after school and actually worked in the Citizens for Kennedy headquarters located on Court Street, right next to where Saul Stearns is now. And every single day I was very interested in government and politics from an early age. And then, as the opportunity came to get involved, I had attended some town board meetings prior to my deciding to run. And I thought the county level provided, at least at that time for me, the most exciting level that so many things were happening in county government. And really, the charter form of county government was fairly new, having just been put into place in 1969. So I thought there was lots of opportunity, and as a result, got involved in the county legislature, very actively involved, and then subsequently decided to run for county executive.
At what point did you decide to affiliate with the Republican Party? You mentioned in your early years you were working for a Democratic candidate, Democratic campaign. At what stage did you find that your political worldview was more aligned with the Republican Party?
Well, sort of how I ended up working on John Kennedy's campaign is one night I was up late, and he was actually appearing on what was the Jack Parr show, the forerunner of the Tonight Show. And I was sitting on the steps. My parents had no clue that I was watching TV over their shoulders. And John Kennedy was on the show, and he issued this statement. He said, I need anyone from 8 to 80 to work on my campaign. So so the next day I came down, went to downtown Binghamton, showed up at the Citizens for Kennedy headquarters, told them what I'd heard the night before, and basically they kind of told me to get lost. They said, no, you're too young to be involved in here. I was basically 11 years old. And I said, no, but I saw John Kennedy. And fortunately, former Binghamton Mayor John Burns was in the back room, and he kind of heard the commotion going out there because I wasn't leaving willingly. He came out And you know, and I obviously recognized him. I'd actually met him a couple of years ago. He'd come to Hillcrest across the street from my dad's soda spa and opened the campaign headquarters in 1958 for the Democrats when I think they made their last attempt to take an office in the town of Fenton. But it's so I had met him at that point in time, and I told him the story, and he said, "Yeah, I saw the show." He said, "That's exactly what John Kennedy said." So from that point on, I was able to stay, and every day I went down and took the last bus home at 9 o'clock every single night. So
you were tenacious.
And then, you know, as
you
time
were insistent.
What's that?
You were insistent that you wanted to be involved.
I wanted to be involved. And then as time evolved, I think my mother was a Republican, my father was a Democrat, but I tended to develop maybe more conservative, particularly conservative financial principles, and thought at that point in time that the Republican Party was more aligned with my thoughts.
How is Broome County different for those, say, who are relative newcomers to Broome County and don't know how things were, say, in the 70s and 80s during the time when you were in the legislature and during your time as county executive? How were things really different back then, a few decades ago, compared to the Broome County of 2015?
Well, I think it was sort of similar to what you see happening in Washington. Now there seems to be, in Washington, you know, everybody seems to be at loggerheads, and, you know, it's either one way or the other way. Whereas in Broome County, during that point in time, if you were sitting in a legislative chambers during a meeting, you'd be pretty hard-pressed to tell who was a Republican, who was a Democrat, based on how they voted or what they said. And it was pretty, you know, everybody got along well. We had Christmas parties, and I don't think that exists today on the local level as well as on the federal level, where, you know, I think on the federal level there was, you know, senators of different parties, you know, could be friends and socialize together. And now it seems so polarizing today, politics, and that's one of the sad things I think about politics today.
What do you think was the biggest accomplishment during your time as county executive?
Well, there was a number of things. I think I loved the job. You know, every day that I came home, I felt that I'd accomplished something. And there was a number of major projects that took place, obviously, during that time frame. The renovation of the county airport. We had a 1950s airport that wasn't air conditioned. If I'd been county executive a few years earlier, I would have convinced or attempted to convince Chemung County and Tompkins County not to redo or rebuild their airports and go for a central airport, a regional airport that, you know, would have served all three markets and would have been able to attract low-fare carriers and much better service. But since they'd already developed their airports, you know, it was incumbent upon me to improve our service because it's the first thing that anybody in business saw when they came to the area. So basically, we rebuilt the terminal at the Broome County Airport. It was a $13.5 million project, and not one nickel came from local tax dollars. It was able to get money from Senator D'Amato, the FAA, and then Senator Libous and the governor each put in $2 million for a total of $4 million from the state. So there wasn't a single penny of local tax dollars that went into that construction of the airport. What
was your biggest disappointment?
I think the fact that as time went on, there were certain things that we wanted to do as far as consolidating some efforts, and not so much consolidating municipalities, but some of the things in the county government itself. I know I was sometimes some of the legislators would say, "Jeff, slow down, you're going too fast." You know, I mean, we did a lot of things. We consolidated, obviously, 911 dispatching countywide. That was one of the things we did. You know, created the first front-end detection unit for welfare fraud in New York State, which at the time that I went to the state after being county executive, I was trying to get other counties to implement what Broome had done very successfully in welfare fraud. So there's a lot of different things that, you know, that the library, for instance, that took so long to get a library developed, but we were able to get that developed, and again, without any bonding. You know, we basically paid cash for the library. And one of the things was, you know, I was able to cut taxes. The 8 years I was county executive, 6 years in a row, was able to cut county property taxes. And the last 2 years, the Medicaid, you know, at that point in time, during those 6 years, other counties were raising taxes, but we were able to, you know, lower taxes, and also, you know, the initiative I had of removing the sales tax on clothing was first done here in Broome County, and convinced the governor to implement that statewide, at least for a while. But I think when the Medicaid crunch was coming down the last 2 years, when we had to increase taxes based on the unfunded mandates from the state, I think that was probably the biggest disappointment, is But when I got to Albany, one of my first tasks was, and it only took about 2 weeks, is to convince the governor and the budget office to start assuming some of those welfare costs, working with the State Association of Counties, and that has saved Broome. Without that, Broome County and most other counties in the state would probably be bankrupt today.
Of course, the Kraham name is in the news with some frequency today. Your son Jared is working in Binghamton City Hall with Mayor Richard David. You must be pleased and proud of him.
I'm extremely proud. You know, he's an intelligent individual, and he just has, you know, real drive, and he has a passion for government, and works very hard. And, you know, in the mayor's office, unlike the county executive's office where he had administrative assistants and all that, in the city hall, there's the mayor, and there's my son and a secretary. That's it for all the calls they get and all the things that they handle in the city. And there's, you know, a lot of great things obviously happening in the city of Binghamton. Rich David is a dynamic leader, and I'm so pleased that Jared is able to work alongside with him and make some positive things happen for the city.
Former Broome County Executive Jeff Kraham, pleasure to see you again. Glad we had this opportunity to talk, and at some point I'll invite you back.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you so much. I wish you well.